Hello everyone, Tina here. I hope your day is going wonderful. Thank you so much for joining me. Today I get to share a project with you for Paper Tray Ink, and we are going to create a Christmas card. We're using some brand new items over at the Paper Tray Ink shop. Today we are going to be playing with the Elegant Edges Holly Berry die set. This is a two-piece die set that creates a really pretty border. And then for my sentiment, we're going to be using the Paper Tray Ink Larger Than Life piece sentiments. This also larger than life piece die goes really good with the piece sentiments, although we're not going to be using that. We're just going to be using the stamp set. And then I'm also going to be using one of the pine cones in the Into the Blooms pine die set. So we're going to jump in and do a little bit of die cutting first with the Elegant Edges Holly Berry dies. This is a two-piece set. It creates a, you can use this on its own, but if you add the border, it creates a really pretty border on your panel. We're going to start by cutting out our border first, and I'm kind of going to use my detail piece as a guide. I want about 1.5 inches from the top from our leaf area here. So I think this is a great place to start our border. I'm going to tape this down, and I'm going to run this through my die cut machine. And as I run this through, I have a little, we're not going to use the white area on the bottom. I'm going to take my Into the Blooms pine die set, and this is a layering die to create a pine cone. You just layer all 5 pieces together. This actually creates 4 different pine cones. So we're just going to die cut one of them. So I'm going to run this through my die cut machine, and I will be right back. Now this is what our border looks like. So far so good. And then this is what our pine cone looks like. It's very easy to put together. We're going to take our detail piece. We're going to line it up. We're going to make sure our border is nice and even all around. And then I'm going to tape this down. We are going to be using the upper portion, so I'm going to leave that blank. But I'm going to run this through my die cut machine, and I will be right back. Now, when I ran this through my die cut machine, I love that all the pieces stayed in. If you have some pieces that popped out, try to put them back in. And what we're going to do is flip this around. And then I'm going to use some tape. This is Post-it note tape. It's a low tack tape. I'm not going to use that. I'm going to use some stronger tape. Any kind of tape that you have. If you have masking tape, you can use that. But I'm going to just tape all of my pieces to my panel. So I went ahead and taped all of my pieces. So now they're taped down to my panel. After we have this done, this is going to give me a great guide. We are going to put this aside, and we are going to build our Into the Bloom pine cone. Let's zoom in to create our pine cone. I want to add a little bit of color. We don't want a white pine cone. So to do that, I'm going to bring in 2 inks. I have dark chocolate and classic craft. First, I'm going to go over the edges of all of my layers with my dark chocolate, and I'm just using my finger daubers to do this, and I'm not worried about the bottom of my pine cone. The only time I need to be worried about that is when I get to this very last piece. But we're just going to do a little bit of shading. Now when we get to the bottom piece, I'm going to use tweezers. This way I don't have inky fingers. And I'm going to make sure that I add a little bit of color to the very bottom, because this is the piece that's going to show. That's all the shading that we're going to do with our dark chocolate. To layer, super fun, super fast, because it really creates a pretty awesome pine cone. I chose white, but of course you can do the same thing with brown. I chose white because I like the snowy look of it. I'm going to start by adding glue to my first layer. This pine cone is very easy to create because all of the bottom line up on the bottom of your pine cone. So let's go ahead and layer this one on here. Like so, layer 1. We'll add a little bit of glue. Then we can add layer 2. We'll add a little bit of glue. We went ahead and added our 4th layer. And then we can lastly add our you can see they all line up at the bottom. And then last we'll add our final layer, which is our 5th layer. So these are all 5 layers. So pretty. Now I want my pine cone a little bit more brown, so this is where our classic craft will come in. I'm going to bring in my craft mat, and then we're going to add a little bit using another finger dauber. We're going to add just some classic craft over the entire front of our pine cone, leaving a few little white areas. Like so. And then that is our pine cone. Love the way that looks. I went ahead and repeated the process 2 more times, so we have 3 pine cones. I'm going to put these off to the side, and then we're going to be working on our beautiful holly berries. We're going to do die cutting using traditional Christmas colors. We're going to die cut out with pure poppy, new leaf, and classic craft. And to do our die cutting, we don't need the border, we just need our detail piece, our holly berry die. And I'm going to die cut out once with each one of these colors. I'm going to run these through my die cut machine, and then I will be right back. Now everything is die cut, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the colors that I want on the very top of my white panel. That will be for the twigs or the flourishes. There's 4 of them. I'm going to use classic craft, so I'm going to set these aside. Okay, and then for our berries, of course we want red berries. We'll punch these out. I got lucky and they all stayed in here. So those are our berries. And then we have for the greenery, we're going to punch out our holly leaves. Like so. And instead of inlaying, what we're going to do is we're going to lay on top to add a little bit of depth. Before we do that, I do want to add a little bit of color to each one of my die cut pieces. So to do that, I'm going to bring back my dark chocolate for my twigs. And then for my holly leaves, I want to darken them up with ripe avocado. And when I do my little ink blending or darkening or shading, I'm just going on the very bottom. Let me show you. I like the really intense dark color on the bottom. You see how intense that is? I love that. So that's what I'm going to go for, and I'm going to kind of fade up. Okay, I got all of my holly leaves done, and I'm thinking while I'm at it, I'm going to go ahead and color in the green flourishes on our green die cut piece. We have our craft ones, but I'm going to use the green ones too. So we'll just punch these out, and I'm going to add a little bit of color while I'm doing this. So my leaves are all done. You can definitely see the shading on them, and I love this. I'm not going to do anything. The holly berries are just too small. I'm not going to do anything with those. But I am going to use my classic craft. Actually, no. We're going to use dark chocolate. And I'm just going to do a little bit of shading. Wonderful. That's all we got to do. These kind of coordinate with our pine cones. We're going to put our inks off to the side. And now is the fun part. I'm going to zoom in, and then we're going to take our die cut pieces, and then we are going to add them to our white panel. To do that, I think it's easiest to take some glue and add it directly to the white panel. I want to start with the leaves. So I'm just going to add glue to all of the leaves. If you love paper piecing, you are going to love this. I always thought paper piecing is very relaxing. I'm going to use my jewel tool, and what we basically do is we're going to find the home that it belongs to, and then we just lay it right on top, following the cut lines like so. Kind of like puzzle piecing. Now I finished up with my holly leaves, and I just think this looks gorgeous. Now what we're going to do is add some little dots of glue to our holly berries. And then we're just going to inlay these. So kind of not inlaying, top laying. It makes it a lot easier if you punch them out so it matches the pattern on here, because this way you know exactly which goes to what. And our holly berries are done, and it just looks gorgeous to me. Now for the twigs or the branches in here, or I'm calling them branches, but there actually could be leaves too. I'm going to add a little bit of glue. I'm just going to go down the spine and then add a few dots on the leaf areas. On all of them at once. That's the nice thing about glue. So you can cover lots of area. Now we're going to do the same thing with these. You find the correct one that matches with your die cut. And I'm loving the way this looks. So we didn't really inlay, we laid on top. But I just think it looks, you could very well inlay, but we have a little bit of dimension. Okay, we have our extra twigs, we have our pine cones. But before we go any further, we're going to stamp our sentiment. I mentioned that we're going to be using the larger than life piece sentiments. And I'm going to stamp peace, love, and joy. We're going to go straight across. So let's do our placement. I'm going to do a practice stamp on a piece of scratch paper here, just to make sure that it is nice and even. I'm going to be using my True Black ink. And I think it's going to be wonderful. So we're looking good. I'm going to go ahead and ink up my sentiment one more time, and then we're going to stamp on our panel. Wonderful. Today's card, we're going to be making a two-tone card, which means the top half will be our panel, the bottom will be our Pure Poppy cardstock. So we're going to adhere this directly to our card base. So once we have our Pure Poppy adhered, wasn't concerned about it not going all the way to the top, only because it's going to be covered with our panel, you see here. I trimmed just a little bit off of the top of our panel, and this is going to go here, but I do want to add a little dimension to this, so we're going to flip this around, and I'm going to add foam tape behind here. Okay, we adhered our panel. Now we get to add our pine cones. I do want some dimension with our pine cones, so I'm going to bring in some foam squares. I'll put a square behind each one. There's already a lot of dimension on these because there's 5 layers. I love that. I'm going to go ahead and add these to the bottom just under our berries. After I have 2 adhered, I'm going to place a foam square where I'm going to put my 3rd pine cone, we're basically doubling up. And then this one's going to go just below the berries here. Okay, I kind of went asymmetrical on these. I didn't want to have complete symmetry. So you notice one of my pine cones is a little bit lower. That's always nice to do when we have some symmetry here. Now, plus our piece is heavy on this side, so if we go a little bit lower on here, it kind of balances out. Our pine cones are adhered. Now we have our little flourishes. For here, I'm going to use some glue, tucking the very bottoms underneath our border here. And I just love the way this looks. I think it turns out fabulous. Now we need bells and whistles. For our bells and whistles, we're actually going to bring in some bells. I have some little silver bells that I had from my stash. I love bells during Christmas time. And then I'm also going to bring in some of our paper tray ink clear gems. These are really pretty gems that are just going to add the right amount of sparkle. To adhere my bells, I'm going to be bringing in our natural twine. I'm going to start by adding a glue dot just above. Actually, we're going to probably cover this the berry in the center. So I'm adding a couple glue dots to that berry that's in the center, the largest berry in the center of our panel. And then we're going to do a bow. We're going to take some twine and we'll create a bow. And then once you're happy, I'm going to add my bow just above that pine cone here. And then I'll go ahead and trim the tail. I might trim these a little bit more in just a minute. And then I'm going to take another piece of twine about the same size, and I'm going to thread 3 of my bells in this. Then I'll thread my final bell. So we have 3 bells in total on our twine. Now I like to grab the ends, pull the bells down to the bottom like so, and then we're going to tie a knot. And what this is going to do is going to make a triangle with the bells. I'm going to flip it over here so you can see. You see how the bells make a little triangle? That's, I think, going to be perfect for the center of this bow. And so since we have the extra twine, we might as well tie another bow. There we go. So we have a double bow with bells in the middle. You see there? And of course you could put a button there if you want. I'm partial to bells, silver bells during Christmas. Okay, I just trimmed my twine. I'm going to keep them a little bit long because I like the way that looks. And then we get to add a little bit of sparkle with our clear gems here. Let's go ahead. I like the smaller ones. And I know I want to add some to the red area. And then we're going to add a few up here. Okay. And I think that's just the right amount of sparkle. What do you think? Before I can say I'm finished, I am going to bring in some glossy accents. And since we have berries here, I always like to add a little bit of dimension to our berries. So I'm going to use a little bit of glossy accents over these berries. It's going to go on cloudy, but it will definitely dry clear and dimensional. I'm not worried about the berry that's underneath my bow. I don't think you can see that very much. But that will finish my project today for Paper Tray Ink. Thank you so much for joining me. Have a wonderful day. I hope you get a chance to check out the brand new release. It's pretty fabulous. I will see you soon. Bye-bye.